You are listening to I Am Refocused Radio with your host, Shamaya Reed. This show is designed to inspire you to live your purpose and regain your focus. And now, here's your host, Shamaya Reed.
Hey, welcome to I Am Refocused Radio. We are here once again. Today, we have another amazing show lineup for y'all. We're going to talk to a returning guest, man, Marty Strong. He is an entrepreneur. He is an author. He's a speaker, and he's also a retired Navy SEAL. He has a book that recently came out. It's Be Visionary, Strategic Leadership in the Age of Optimization. And I can't wait to talk about this awesome book. First and foremost, I want to welcome you to the show. Say, how you doing, man?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
Man, so this book is another must read. I mean, it's all about planning, strategy, and adapting in different situations, understanding adjustments that you have to make. That's life, man. That's in professional business and personal business as well. So what inspired you to write this book at this time?
Well, my first book, Be Nimble, was about the stress of leadership and learning how to deal with the challenges of being a leader and leading teams and mentoring and coaching and all those things. And in one of the chapters, I touched on strategy and strategy development. And a few people that read the drafts, they're all CEOs. They pointed out that chapter could be its own book, because they felt that as much as I was touching on things that weren't taught in business schools or even taught in companies and organizations about leadership, teaching people about having a vision and converting that into a concept and developing that into a strategy and all that, that's not taught anywhere either. So that's why I ended up writing the second book, to explain, to illuminate, to educate people on how to do it, why to do it. And as you noted, it's for personal, professional, or for business leadership application.
And with your experience being part of the Navy SEALs, I mean, that really plays a big role in not just being organized, but having that discipline as well, because it's not something that you just do and then all of a sudden you're a master at it. It's something that you have to kind of break down the process.
Exactly right. Anything that's worth doing is worth doing well. And it takes practice. It takes a while to form the habit of thinking big thoughts, thinking deep thoughts, looking out at the horizon, looking all around, 360 degrees, self-awareness, situation awareness, market awareness. You don't even know if the competitors are sneaking up on you if you don't look behind you. So you have to have, as they say in the military, you have to have your head on a swivel, but you also have to have your intellect on a swivel. You have to be thinking the same way. You have to be anticipating threats and also looking for opportunities from every angle, and also far out into the future, so that you can anticipate them and either aim towards them if they're an opportunity or aim away from them if they're a threat.
And with business owners out there, this is a perfect read for them, because you are touching on how the operation side and how that is something that has to be kind of, if you will, maintenance. Because sometimes we can get stagnant in our approach and how this is how we always done it. So if it's not broke, don't fix it. But what's wrong having that kind of mentality of, if you will, just being plateau?
Well, I like to use the analogy of, somebody running a railroad. The trains could be on time, the tracks could be in perfect shape, the train engine could be in pristine condition. You've optimized, you've made it as efficient and as perfect as you can. But as you're doing all that, you never look up to see that the tracks are going to end at the point of a cliff, dropping off to nothing else. You get so focused on executing, get so focused on the to-do list, you get so focused on optimizing and measuring what just happened. And that's the first problem. The second problem is you tend to think that everything that just happened, your past, is going to be an extension forward, and that becomes your future. That's not the case. Life throws things at you. The universe throws things at you. Changes all around you. It's much, much more likely that the future is going to take a hard left or a hard right turn. And if you're not paying attention to it, you're going to be caught short.
And that's the worst. That's the worst feeling, because if you're not careful, you will start to miss out on opportunities. And sometimes opportunities, we can miss them real bad if we just keep doing the old way of thinking, because now we're just staying in the same like circle. We're not expanding our mind. We're not expanding our vision. We're just staying tight in this small space where there's no growth there. It's just basically, okay, another routine. I'm going to just do this for the next 20 years.
Exactly. And I'm talking about an intellectual habit. An intellectual habit is not doing the same thing over and over and over and over and over the same way. An intellectual habit is being aware and knowledgeable and humble and absorbing new information, talking to people that you've never talked to before, getting out of the groupthink, forget what school you went to, forget what your last job looked like, forget any positive or negative things that happened in your career, clear your mind of all that, and have a habit of being open-minded and objective. If you do that, then you can be truly curious. And if you're truly curious, you can be truly creative. And the opposite of that is to basically think that the same thing you did and the same thing you're doing is going to be the same thing you have to do going forward. And that's almost never the case in any walk of life or any vocation.
And with these strategies that you illustrate in the book, they're very clear. They're not even abstract by any means. How important is it for readers to keep that in mind, and also aspiring leaders to keep that in mind, that you have to be super clear in what you're trying to hit as far as your target and your goals?
Well, the objective of communications is to exchange something of importance, whether it's an idea, whether it's an alert, a warning, or a direction that you need to go. And being clear means you don't have to use a lot of fancy words, and you don't have to muddy it all up with a lot of jingo and a lot of business terms. You just basically have to sit down and be straight with people and as plain spoken as you can. That's the best way to communicate. I try to, in the book, make it conversational, like you're sitting down and having a one-on-one mentoring session with me, because I found that's the way in life that I get the best results. When I'm talking to somebody across a table over a cup of coffee, over breakfast, over lunch, and just having a conversation, it's much easier to communicate and to influence as much as you need to influence the thoughts of others if you just have a conversation like a regular person. And that's whether you're talking to a peer, whether you're talking to your boss, or whether you're talking to people that report to you. That's important in life. It's important in family communications, and it works everywhere. It's universally acceptable and effective.
You're listening to Refocus Radio, talking to Marty Strong and about his book, Be Visionary, Strategic Leadership in the Age of Optimization. Man, people are in a place right now. We're in times where people really have to pay attention to what they are doing, one, and two, what do they need to do and plan for tomorrow, because we're in times where you can't kind of just sit back and relax and say, you know what, let's just let life continue the way it has been. I mean, we're in times where we really have to stay on top of our game, if you will, especially with businesses. You touched in the book with business markets for leaders and those who are in that world. Why should they be very open to the mindset that if they don't find clarity in what they're trying to do, they can really kind of, how can I say this? They can really damage their potential growth?
Well, resources are scarce for pretty much everybody, so they can't be wasted without some negative impact. And the scarcest resource we all have is time. So if you stagnate, if you refuse to look around and recognize things are changing in your personal, professional life, as a leader inside of an organization or a leader of the entire organization, what you're doing is you're wasting time, and you're wasting all the other resources associated with what you're doing. So thinking those big thoughts and looking out at the horizon and trying to grasp where the world is moving is a great way to apply resources in a very focused and in a very effective way. Sometimes it means you got to stop exactly what you've been doing. You've got to admit, you say to yourself, look, I thought we were going down this path, and I committed everything to that. I committed my time, my energy, my organization, everything. And I just realized, because I thought about it and I listened and I took it all in, that that's the wrong path. It takes a lot, and it takes a lot of humility and a lot of courage to say, stop, and create a plan and go in the other direction. Now, it's much, much easier just to kind of roll up in a ball, get it in the fetal position, and pretend like everything's going to be the same, and you don't have to make a hard choice. You don't have to make that decision. But that's not the way life works, and that's not the way the universe works. The universe is all about change. Everything's morphing, changing, evolving all around us, everything. And whether it's the small things in your neighborhood or it's the bigger things in your industry, you have to pay attention, and you have to absorb it, and you have to have that habit of intellectual humility and open-mindedness.
Now, I like that you said that, because I think that's very true. You do have to be humble enough to say, okay, yeah, I need to kind of expand how I look at things, because we can get tunnel vision in a way where we just go through the routine. I mean, I think that's human nature. It's like we just kind of, okay, if it's not broke, we don't need to worry about it right now. But to your point, sooner or later, life is going to be like, hey, yeah, you're going to have to make some adjustments. You can't just do the same thing the way you've been doing it. But this book is really helping people become that better leader, become that person that others can look up to and rely on. Because, I mean, I heard it being said before, you know, if they don't do it, who will? You know, like, you have to be ready to say, okay, this is something that I should be doing, that I need to do, and not worry so much about what others are not doing.
Exactly. You know, it's not about quitting. It's not about, you know, discarding your goals. If you think about the idea of a mountain, you want to climb the mountain, so that's your objective. And you make a plan and you start to go up, you know, a certain way, and you get about halfway up, and whether it's the weather, the plan didn't anticipate a rock fall that's blocked your way, et cetera. At that point, you have to recognize the plan might have been good right up until it was no longer any good. So you have to use your judgment. You have to apply wisdom, and you have to go back down the mountain and go up another way. So I'm not really talking about not achieving the objectives or the goals, the big life goals, or the big, you know, organizational goals. I'm saying that there's a lot of different ways to skin that cat. There's a lot of different ways to get from one point to another. It's not always from point A to point B. Sometimes it's from point A to Z, and it's in an arc. So you have to think those things through and be willing to recognize it and act in a mature way, in an intellectual way, in a wise way, and change course.
And with the book that we're talking about, Be Visionary, Strategic Leadership in the Age of Optimization. Visionary is like, okay, I can relate to that because I'm a introvert, creative person. So I love thinking about, you know, just the possibilities of X, Y, Z. But strategy is a skill set that needs to be learned. It's not something I believe people out of the gate, I'm an expert in strategizing. I think that's something we all have to, like you said earlier, humble ourselves a little bit more and say, okay, I need to figure a way to strategize things, because naturally we all want to have that creativity, to have a vision. But naturally, in reality, you got to develop that plan of process.
Yeah, interestingly enough, as I mentioned earlier, I had a lot of insights from people that were reading my first book, Be Nimble. And the insight was, and that was surprising to me, was they had not or could not cite times either in school or in early jobs or as they were moving their way up the corporate ladder, so to speak, where they were actually tutored, mentored, coached, trained in the art of strategy. It was just an expectation when you got to a certain level of the org chart. Somebody just came in one day and said, hey, congratulations, you're the president, you're the CEO. And by the way, the board wants to hear what your strategy is for next year. And as they walk out of the door, you realize you've basically been an expert at optimizing and lean, efficient management and executing systems and processes and managing talent that's been doing exactly what they were hired to do. But now you're sitting there staring out the window going, well, how do I know? I don't know what's going to happen in the future. And it's all about risk. You've been taught to risk mitigate up to that point. And now basically that leap of faith to really do truly visionary strategic thinking means you've got to take a shot. You've got to take a risk. You've got to apply resources, thought, and maybe even your reputation, and in the worst case, maybe even your job, to lay down a marker and say, this is what I think we need to do. This is why. And if you have to make a pivot, if you have to change the path of that organization, you got to kind of suck it up and tell them the truth. Say, this is what I see. The other, option is to not say any of that. To just say, well, I'm not going to engage in all that. That's high risk for me personally, professionally. And I'm used to having lots and lots of information before I make a decision. I can't make a decision about what happens in 2 years. So I'm just going to ignore that. And my strategy is going to be a basic operations plan that looks just like last year's. So it's a crisis of confidence, and in a lot of ways, I think it's a ethical dilemma, because you know what you need to do, but nobody taught you how.
And that's something important for any professional or whether you're a business owner, if you're an employee, you go 9 to 5, because our listeners is a mixture of business professionals and also those who are aspiring to just be the best in their career. So if it's 9 to 5, I feel it's the same concept. If you really want to have the best in life, then you eventually have to strategize. You can't continue to fluff it, if you will, because eventually it's just going to be a dead end.
Yeah, I agree completely. If you think of yourself as you, Inc., then your life path, your life decisions, your life goals, you treat them the same way as I've been discussing about organizations. You can just swap out the habits and the tricks and the tools and the tips and just apply it to you as your own brand. And this is something that I talk to transitioning military veterans a lot about, because when you get out of high school, your family expects you to do something and do something well and achieve and be successful. When you get out of college, people are saying the same thing. What are you going to do? Get out right out of the box, be successful, be whatever you're going to be. And it turns out that, you don't have to be any of those things out of high school or right out of college. Matter of fact, if you live to be 60, 70 years old, you might have 4 different life paths. You might be an engineer who decides to open up a vineyard. You might be somebody who is a musician that decides to go into Wall Street and trade stocks. There's nothing in this country that really prohibits you from sitting down and trying to figure out what's the best path for you. So you apply these same principles. You have to sit down, you have to think about it, kind of take the dream, look at the horizon, develop it into a concept, put some edges around it, put a little bit of density into the concept, start putting things on paper, and say, I think that's where I want to go. Now that you have a cardinal direction and a signpost out there, in the future, you say, now how do I get from here to there? And that's actually the easier part. It may take a while. It may be a lot of little baby steps to get there. It may take a couple of years, it may take some dollars, whatever it is. But at least you know where you're going and you know why.
This time, Refocus Radio talking to our guest, Marty Strong. Go to his website, martystrongbenimble.com, and get his book that we're talking about today, Be Visionary, Strategic Leadership in the Age of Optimization. And for our listeners, the whole key of this interview and this talk is think and go live your life with strategy. Because without strategy, like what you just kind of illustrated moments ago, it's almost like you pick a destination on the map, but you have absolutely no plan how you can reach that destination. And that's almost as worse as not having a target on the map to hit.
It can be, but I think it's easier for people to reach out and ask for help in thinking through the navigation from where you are to where you want to be. It's much more difficult because you have to make the decision for yourself on what that end state is, that end goal. So there's lots of path to success. There's lots of path to your success. You have to define for yourself what you think success means, and not really let anybody else do that for you. And you might change that multiple times in your lifetime, and that's okay.
And you having the experience being Navy SEAL, I mean, that's a awesome accomplishment, and we understand that path. It requires a lot of discipline. But for you personally, how has that experience helped you write these books and help people to see things in a different perspective that you were able to use those skill sets in your career as a Navy SEAL?
Well, it's a little difficult to compare being a SEAL to the regular world because we're all handpicked, we're all selected, we all go through a crucible to make sure that we have kind of intense psychological resilience, that we are devoted to each other, devoted to the mission. And we have a lot of intense individual motivation. We don't require orders. We don't require motivational speeches. We don't require, anybody prodding us to make us want to be the best we can be. So that is not normal, outside of elite special operations units. However, something that does convey that I learned, I always thought I was a creative guy, but I realized a couple of years after I was in the teams that the way we put missions together, the way we solved problems was unique. And I found that out because I started working with some Army and Marine Corps units, and they weren't doing what we were doing. They were doing it very linear. The people in charge were telling the people, the junior ranking people, this is what we're going to do. This is when we're going to do it. This is how we're going to do it. Everybody show up at this time with this gear, done. Well, in the SEAL teams, we were sitting around in a room saying, okay, here's the problem. How can we crack this nut? And everybody was allowed to throw in their 2 cents. Everybody, regardless of your rank, your age, how long you'd been a SEAL, whether you had combat time or not. It was a free-for-all. And it was a pretty aggressive free-for-all, up until the point where we either ran out of time and we had to put a plan together. And at that point, the officer in charge, which I was for the second half of my career, would have to kind of galvanize all the thoughts, put it together in some kind of plan, and then everybody would say, okay, we're going to do this. And they were 100% committed to it because we thought all the angles out. We thought everything we could think out with all the assumptions that we were given and all the what ifs and contingencies we could come up with. Very, very intensely creative. And we may have a different way of doing that every single time a mission came in front of us. So that I took with me, 20 years of that repetition. It became a part of my DNA. It's the way I've always solved problems. It's the way I write books. It's why I write books. It's why I help people with these challenges. It's how I lead my company. So I think that was probably in the end, the discipline part was important, but I think the creative mindset and the agile intellectual approach to problem solving with everybody involved was probably the biggest thing I took away.
Once again, listen to I'm Refocused Radio, talking to our guest today, Marty Strong. You can go to his website. It's easy, Marty Strong, BeNimble.com. And if you missed his other book, we're talking about today's book, real quick, Be Visionary, Strategic Leadership in the Age of Optimization. But last time he was on the show, we also talked about his book, Be Nimble, how the creative Navy SEAL mindset wins in the battlefield and in business. And I think these two books go hand in hand, almost like a part one, part two. Like part two is digging deeper in a specific topic, but I think they both can help people kind of strategize where they want to attempt to be, but not go there blindly, but go there with some kind of intent.
That was a pretty good way of summing those two books up. And I'm working on the third book right now, so I think that should be step 3 in their chronology.
Well, I guess we're going to have a series of these then, because I think people, I say all the time, the show format is real simple and clear. I think that's why a lot of people appreciate it, but it's because people out there are hungry. They want to know what's the truth, like what's the story, what is it that other people are doing and trying in life that's helped bring value in their life. And I think that's what's important through these stories and these topics, because it shines light in areas where I think a lot of people, they're actively trying to search for it and better themselves.
That's good. That's all. That's a good service, actually. I'm successful, but I think I'm successful because I always wake up hungry and thinking that somebody's out there who's going to be able to beat me at whatever I'm trying to do. So I always have to learn. I always have to improve. I get up at 5:30 every morning. I'm writing usually by 5:45. I'm right now I'm taking a class online on screenwriting. I wrote a screenplay a long time ago. That's one of my goals is I'm going to try to write a screenplay or two. And I do a lot of things, marketing, a lot of things in the morning, all before the sun comes up. And then I get ready to go to work and I go to my day job as a CEO. So I do that 7 days a week. And it's a rhythm, it's a habit, and there's learning in there and there's creativity in there. And, I have time to throw a workout in from time to time too. So that's how I make it all happen for me. And I think most people, if they think about it, they could probably get into their own kind of battle rhythm that's productive and helpful.
I remember someone once told me that you are the CEO of your own life. And I feel like whether you are someone in school or you work in a 9 to 5 or you're an owner or just somewhere on the ladder, I think if we all look at ourselves individually, we can find part of ourselves in these books as far as better preparing ourselves to make the next step versus just going through life hoping that it gets better. I don't think it gets better without us actually doing something about it.
You have to put in the effort for sure. And discipline isn't always daunting. Discipline can be the small things. Discipline is just sometimes just putting one foot in front of the other, just getting out of bed. And probably the discipline that everybody should pay attention to is the discipline of silencing the negative voices in your head. When I was in SEAL training, that's kind of what I realized was happening with the guys around me. You start with about 120 to 150 guys. They've already been pre-selected down from about 500 to get to the starting line of the course. And within 5 weeks, you're that 120-ish are cut in half. You graduate with 20 to 25. My class graduated with 13 originals 6 months later. So you go, well, why them and not me? What did they do? What caused them to quit? What caused them to drop away? And later on, when I went back as an instructor, I was trying to talk to these students that wanted to quit. I said, well, why do you want to quit? And I realized they were struggling with the voice inside their head that was telling them they weren't worthy, or the course wasn't for them, or the future of being a SEAL wasn't worth being or doing. And they were listening to that voice. And I basically started telling people, you need to be the voice in your head, not listen to the voice in your head. And they went, what do you mean? I said, you need to set the dialogue up. You need to tell yourself when you wake up in the morning, I am the voice in my head. I'm going to take care of this. I'm going to do this. I run the show here. And every time one of those whispers start to ramp up in your mind, you have to stop and psychologically force them into the shadows and say, no, not today. And you got to do that all through your entire life, because fear and failure and all those things we're all human. Those things pop up all the time. I don't care if you're a Navy SEAL or not. So I use the same technique now. Something everybody can do and everybody can appreciate as a discipline, a psychological discipline every single day.
Man, that's powerful. I think that is awesome for people to marinate on, because if you listen long enough, you will apply whatever you're listening to. So if it's fear or if it's light, you get to choose and you get to live what you listen to. So yeah, I think that's spot on right there.
Yeah, and who you associate with too. I mean, that's, when I tell people that ask me, I have a son or I have a family member that's getting ready to go SEAL training, what advice can you give them? And I say, well, just tell them one thing: stay away from the people that are quiet and pensive, and tell them to hang really close to the ones that are laughing when things are worse. Because the people with a good sense of humor, all SEALs, Green Berets, Marine Spec Ops guys, they all have great senses of humor, because that's a way of diffusing tension and stress and anxiety, right? But it's also a lot more fun to make fun of what condition you're in. You're all covered in mud, everybody's freezing. some guy, is totally supposed to sing a song and he can't get the words out. And that's hilarious if you look at it the right way. Or you can look at it and say, woe is me. Oh my God, I can't believe I'm doing this. I can't handle this. And so you have to just kind of decide to be that way. You just have to decide to hang with those kinds of people. And I'm saying this, and I'm not the only person that's ever said this, but if you do a little inventory of the people around you in your life, whether they're family members or whoever they are, there are people that the second you say, I have an idea, I was wondering maybe if I could do, and that the first thing out of their mouth is, you can't. That won't ever happen. There's no way. And that's not what you need around in your life. It's one thing to go and ask somebody an opinion to punch holes in a plan, but the people around you that are constantly telling you, no, you can't, well, that's destructive. And that will start to make it harder and harder for you to have that discipline, because now the voices aren't just in your head. Yeah. And now they're in your social circle of friends and family. So yeah, be careful with that and try to find somebody that's upbeat and enthusiastic. And when it's cold and rainy and you don't have the right clothes on and you have 5 miles to walk to the nearest place, they're telling a joke.
Yeah, I like that. I think too, real quick, is you kind of have to be that person as well. Be that source of light, if you will, that source of inspiration and supportiveness. Support other people's dreams and visions and goals, because there's a saying, you water into someone's life, you actually are watering back into your own. So I think it's also that concept as well. No, don't just surround yourself with good source of productive people that are going to help you, go to the next level. But you also be that person that someone else can lean on as well.
That's a great point. Reciprocate and be mindful of being judgmental as your first reaction.
Man, once again, we've been talking to our special guest, Marty Strong. You can go get his book, Be Visionary, Strategic Leadership in the Age of Optimization. And you can also get his other book that we talked on the previous show, Be Nimble, How the Creative Navy SEAL Mindset Wins on the Battlefield and in Business. Go to his website, martystrongbenimble.com. Once again, I want to say thank you. Man, it's a true honor having a Navy SEAL, former Navy SEAL on the show. I think that's a really great honor. Thank you for your service and what you share with our audience.
Well, thanks, and I enjoyed it, and it's also an honor to be on the show. So thanks for inviting me again.